Hello, I'm John, and you are listening to the Purple Worm podcast, a podcast where four British guys get together and chew the fat about British and other RPGs. We've had some great voicemails, which I'm going to be turning you over to Colin Green, aka Spike Pit, in a few moments so that he can answer those. But before we get started, we have a really nice message from Ray Otis, so we're going to open with that. Take it away, Ray.
The problem with this Purple Worm thing you guys have going is that it's just too damn good, right? I mean, you're really ruining the business for all of us who try to do a solo podcast. We're all going to have to join these super teams, so, thanks a lot.
So there's Ray Otis from Plundergrounds. Thanks for your kind words, Ray. Glad you're enjoying the show. But I tell you what, I can't let you get away with that. I'm going to call you out. Trying to put together a solo show. This is the same Ray Otis who's on Swordbreaker with Logan Howard. No, Monster Brothers. I'll get it right in the end. You fellas will know if you listen to Arlen's latest episode. Che Webster there calling me out for getting the name of Arlen's show wrong. He'll be on calling me out for getting Monster Brothers wrong next. So not Swordbreaker, Monster Brothers. Then we've got You're On with Angus doing Kirby's Kids. And then there's that delving deeper thing you do with Cody where you both record and then put them out on your own podcast. So I don't know, Ray, that doesn't sound like solo podcasting to me. Not to mention the ones we've done together ourselves. You got to watch him.
Hi fellas, it's Goblin's Henchman here. Just a quick voice message to say I'm enjoying the Purple Worm podcast. Interesting hearing the various back and forth stuff. Now, as a slight petty point, and mainly on me to be perfectly honest, for the longest time there I thought John was Swiss. And this was pitched to me as an all-British podcast. I think mainly because of his icon on G Plus and MeWe. I think it's had that red, all red dice with a die with a white cross in the middle. Plus sign, so I've always kind of had it Swiss John, but obviously I've heard him ring into various podcasts since, so Anchor podcasts. So I know he's a Brit, but it's still in my brain. I can't shake it. And if David gets around to running that procedural adventure of mine, I'd definitely be interested in feedback on that. I may be behind on the curve here because I'm a few weeks behind on my podcast. Need to catch up. Topic suggestion: hex crawls, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, cheers, fellas. Bye.
So when I saw Goblin Henchman's name crop up in my notifications for Purple Worm, I thought, excellent, we're going to get some real cool, out of left field, creative ideas to bring to our games. But no, what do we get? Crazy theories on Swiss John. I love it. Swiss John. That's got to stick. Right, everybody, we need to make this stick now. Swiss John from Derby. Nice one, Goblin's Henchman. And I think there is a good chance that hex crawls will come up at some point. In fact, I'm pretty sure we've touched on it. We're always talking about random tables. In fact, we probably need to change the record. But thanks for the call in, mate, and I hope you're well.
Looking for some interesting weird games, I recommend you check out Operation Unfathomable by Jason Schultes and Anomalous Subsurface Environment by Patrick Wetmore. The Islands of Purple Haunted Putrescence by Venture Satanis and Deep Carbon Observatory by Patrick Stewart.
Thanks for the call in there, Chad. I don't know if it's just at my end or what, but the message came through fairly garbled. Don't know if you're just scrambling it to preserve your secret identity for fear of reprisals. I don't know, but I made out most of it, and I'm familiar with about half of those. Deep Carbon Observatory is certainly pretty weird. The Vengeance Satanis one I'm not familiar with, nor the what is it, subsurface anomalous subsurface environments or something. I've heard of it, also not familiar with that one. And Operation Unfathomable by Jason Schultes is one of my favourites. I really like what he did with that book. I haven't got it to the game table yet, but my plan is to combine Middlelands, Dolmen Woods, and some other stuff that it escapes me now. Operation Unfathomable, obviously. Oh yeah, Gardens of Yin. I might pass on the Stygian Library. But funnily enough, fellow Purple Worm John Large, Swiss John, as we're going to be calling him from now on, also likes to mash these things together and has mentioned some of the same titles. So, yeah, definitely pretty weird, Operation Unfathomable. And I don't know why we didn't mention that in the episode. I think because it's more of a setting and not a role-playing game, it might have not really been included. But thanks for the call in, and my apologies to listeners for the quality. Perhaps you'll hear it different to me, but yeah, technicalities, not my strong point.
Okay, we are now recording. Welcome back to the Purple Worm with Dave Aldridge, Pete Jones, and of course Colin from the Spike Pit, and myself, John, from the Red Dice Diaries. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Into the Odd. Again, I'm fucking showing the book, I don't know why. I've recorded so many YouTube videos, I can't get out of the habit of like showing a book when I mention it. But this is,
cut.
Yeah. We're done. I'm out. No, someone call my agent. Now, we're talking about doing it again. Look, Into the Odd by Chris McDowell from Lost Pages, which is it's a fairly small book, sort of like paperback book, 48 odd pages. Okay, so who wants to start us off with talking about Into the Odd?
Well, Into the Odd is a stripped down D&D, and if you don't know, odd, the word odd comes from original D&D, from which it was based. And basically, he's cut the 6 abilities down to 3: strength, dexterity, and willpower. And character creation is very simple. You roll for your stats, and then you get a starter package. And depending on your hit points and your highest ability is what you start with. So, for example, if you have 4 hit points and 12 is your highest ability, you'd get a pickaxe, some manacles, and some arcanum. And that is as simple as character creation goes.
I was going to say as well, Pete, just to jump in there, I know we'll probably go on to talk about this a bit later on, and I know we've talked about sort of implied worlds before, but sort of even at this early stage, I mean, we're on like page 5 when you get to like the starter package table. Even looking at that, I mean, some of it's fairly generic, you know, sort of like sword, whatever the shield you'll find in like your average fantasy. And as you start looking at it, there's things like muskets and blunderbusses. You're like, right, okay, so obviously black powder exists.
Yeah.
Then as you push on, you start getting to things like
artificial lung, I like.
Yeah, exactly. You start getting onto like cigars. Obviously, cigars exist, random stuff like that. There's people who can like see in the dark or have glowing eyes. Like there's a prosthetic hand. So obviously, sort of crude prosthetics have existed for a long time in the real world. But there's lots of stuff on there like that you maybe wouldn't associate with your traditional sort of medieval worldview, which I think is quite interesting. And it starts sort of lacing in that sort of implied setting, almost right from the get-go, pretty much.
That's right.
Yeah, which is more of an industrial setting, is
Yeah.
it? Maybe not quite Victorian, but a kind of industrial revolution type setting.
And I think even the cover of the book sort of says that. I mean, you've got Into the Odd written in sort of like red font, but it's done like one of those sideways maps of a dungeon.
Yeah, it's like your satanic meals, isn't it? It's like
it's got like your big sort of turning wheel and your sort of mill wheels, and like leads down into the dungeon. There's like some tentacles and like a gallows in there, and a huge sort of water wheel style construction. So it's got your ingredients, like your classic sort of dungeoneering stuff on the cover. But even there, it started to hint that this game's going to be a little bit more industrial, perhaps. Than
Yep.
the game.
And it's a very fragile game as well, because you start off with very few hit points, between 1 and 6 hit points, and the mechanic is that you roll a save for everything, so you're saving against your strength or saving against your dexterity, and attacks automatically hit. So if you're doing an attack, you roll for damage. There is no attack roll. So if you're going into combat with the monster, you're going to take damage, and if you've only got 1 or 2 hit points, you ain't going to last long. So I think the idea of the game is to try and avoid full-on contact and trying to make players think of alternative ways of dealing with situations. That's the impression I get from the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, when I sort of read the rules about, attacks just do damage minus whatever the armor of your opponent is, I really like that, because one of the things that I particularly like about OSR games in general is because, by and large, since they all give you like a lower hit point total, and let's face it, you're not any great shakes in the hero department when you first start off, you really have to be careful and almost sort of think a bit more tactically on how to like edge things to your advantage when you get into a combat, especially at lower levels. So this sort of gave me that same feeling, like different mechanic, but I still got the same sort of vibe. I think I was like, all right, if I've got 4 hit points, I'm going to be automatically taking at least some damage. So I need to make sure I've got some armor. I need to take advantage of cover. I need to try and perhaps catch my opponent unaware or hedge the bets in my favour. And I really quite like that sort of thing personally.
I'm going to give a shout out to the Loco Ludus podcast, because he does a really good interview with Chris McDowell, and Chris talks about why he went down that rabbit hole. Because he found playing D&D games that characters were looking at their character sheets, looking for, what can I do with the skills I've got? Well, if you haven't got much on your character sheet, then players have got to think for themselves.
I mean, I think as well, one of the things I found is another reason why I quite like this sort of like automatic damage rule is I certainly, not all games, obviously, it's a bit of a generalization, but certainly I've played in D&D games where you get into one of those combats where you're coming up against like some sort of enemy that has like a high armor class and you're maybe a low level, and you're like, all right, okay, I've got a pretty good armor class, they're not really hitting me, but I can't hit them, and you're just there for ages, just like rolling dice with like actually nothing really happening.
Yeah, whiffing.
Yeah. But there's another thing, isn't it? And again, the Loco Ludus is really good for this. What he's done is double down on the abstract nature of hit points.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, if you've got your fighter types have normally got a sort of constellation of things. They've got a higher attack bonus. They can wear bigger armor. They've got more hit points. Here, if you like, all of those elements are captured in having more hit points. Where hit points represent all of that. They represent all of your ability to stoke or avoid damage in that combat situation. So he's really streamlined what is usually spread across those various different systems.
And they're not actually even hit points in this system, are they? I forget what he calls them, but he doesn't actually call them hit points.
I have actually got the free version, which precedes the version that you guys are waving around, I think, the published version. And in this, he does call them hit points, which he makes it all one word. But I think later on he renames it for Bastionland. I think he's called it hit protection.
Yeah,
that's it.
To again suggest that more abstract nature. So you're not taking wounds. You don't take a wound until you take
your strength.
Until you go down. Yeah.
Because it then starts. There's critical hits, and your strength gets eroded and stuff like that.
Although I've got to admit, with the way you sort of like smoothly slipped in a mention of Electric Bastionland, I'm starting to suspect that you guys have got me together to record this episode with the sole purpose of persuading me to buy a copy of Electric Bastionland.
I have no dog in that race, actually. No particular. It does look tasty, though. But...
It does look quite good. I mean, to be honest, although as I've said numerous times, I think artwork's quite subjective. I actually, in the sort of free PDF that has been made available to backers and non-backers of it, which I'd advise anyone to go and have a look at, even if you're thinking that probably won't be interested. It's a free sample. Why would you not have a look at it? I actually found some of the black and white artwork quite evocative in that. I mean, I know in previous episode we were talking about how sort of great the old black and white artwork was in fighting fantasy books, and I obviously not identical because it's like a different sort of world, but I almost got a similar sort of feel in some of the artwork in the free sort of preview PDF. It was very sort of, like I say, it invoked an appropriate mood to what I thought they were trying to convey in the rest of the free PDF.
Yeah, I looked at the same download, and I think the artwork's evocative. I mean, I think we could talk about artwork quite a lot. I don't know if you want to talk about it now, but
yeah, go on.
Yeah, well,
God,
I would say that.
By. Get on with it.
Okay, well, there's at least two people on this podcast that said they basically couldn't give a flying how's your father about artwork, and
Correct.
They're interested in the content.
Guilty
Well,
charge.
I would say that the artwork is totally content. If it's not that sort of clip art or free domain placeholder type of stuff that creeps in, and all this ties into my my bugbear of RPGs is don't do RPGs as a one-man band, man. You need a team. If you're going to put out a decent RPG, you need a proper creative team with people that can do this stuff. And people get artists, and they get some good artists, and that's all well and good. A lot of the time, this seems to be led by a designer or a writer. But have they got editors? Have they got play testers? And the person, I've been looking through some books today, and the person who is left out the most times is the graphic designer and the layout artist. The person who does layout and graphics, they don't get a look in. Every writer thinks they can lay out. Every artist thinks they can do graphic design. And I'll tell you what, I don't think so. I think that is BS.
Yeah,
and
it's definitely a specialised skill set.
It is. And I'm not saying you don't get the Renaissance man that can do it all. You definitely do. A pretty good example is Blades in the Dark, Harper. He's a pretty good all-rounder. I don't know how much other people have been involved, but just looking at the credits, he's done a lot of the creativity on Blades in the Dark. And that's a pretty good layout. I like Evil Hat layout generally.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty slick and they're pretty, professional, as you'd expect. But I feel like, just talking about Electric Bastionland, there's no way I would have gone for the letter format for that book. No way. Just looking at it, I don't know why he's made the design choice he has. I think, like John was saying, there's some wicked art in there. In that document, I thought there's some great art.
I think with it being a unique setting as well, the art really sort of sets it apart. I mean, with your generic fantasy settings, most people got an idea what a fantasy setting is. They've seen Lord of the Rings, they've seen Conan, but with something like Troika or Into the Odd, with a unique setting, I think the art does make it. It gives you a feel.
That's
for that
content,
setting.
yeah. At that point, because it's a picture paints 1,000 words, and that would be my argument for saying if you've got good art that really captures your setting, a lot of the heavy lifting could be done with that art and save you reading reams of, the sort of stuff that turns up in Wizards stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about several of the Kickstarter campaigns I've backed over the years, when you see someone who's like, right, okay, well, I've got all the text ready for whatever book it is. I'm doing the Kickstarter to raise money to pay some artists to do some good art and to pay someone to do the layout, because then I'm like, right, I know I'm guaranteed a product in some form because you've already got it pretty much done, but you're trying to go that extra sort of step to make it a really good product.
Right, and can I jump in there because I suspect I'm one of those two people, Colin, that you're slightly misrepresenting because
you're not. So I'll make it free.
Oh, fine. No, that's all right then. That's all right then. No, you're not. Because if you with the Kickstarter, if you get the guy who says, look, so I've got a full draft. The Kickstarter will pay for the art and to make it into a beautiful book, right? If you then get the guy that then shares that full draft, right? I'll take that full draft very happily, and if it's good, I will then back the Kickstarter and pay for the book with the art and be really happy to get the book and the art. But I'll have actually made the judgment about whether I want it. Probably I'll have seen some pictures of the art, but it'll be off the back of the text.
Yeah.
The thing I always resent is where people they won't judge the text on its own merit because it hasn't got any pictures in. Do you know what I mean? And that's the bit, or the people that feel they have to go and bung in a whole load of stock art because no one's going to read it unless it's got pictures. And then, so you see all those sort of strange.
I very much agree. Very much agree, Dave. I mean, one thing for myself is I like to be able to look at enough of a sample of something to make an informed decision about whether I'm going to buy it. I don't like sort of having to buy things blindly. So it's like, for instance, I know we mentioned Gavin Norman's Old School Essentials, sort of actually being posted out, I believe, now from the distribution centres
this week.
But part of that was being able to look at the previous version, so BX Essentials, and also looking at the sort of art-free PDFs that were released for nothing. So you could have a look at that. You could go, right, do I like this content enough to want to splash out on obviously the nicer version with all the art and whatever, where you can then make that informed decision. You haven't just got to look at the cover or one or two pages of text and go, I think it's probably going to be good, and then sort of just guess and make a decision. So, and I think that's a good way for publishers for getting goodwill from people. Because if you say to me, like, look, I'm that confident in the stuff I've written, here's a version with no art, have a look at it, see what you think. If you don't like it, no harm done, but I'm confident enough that you're going to like this, that you're going to want the good version. So that says to me that they believe in their product that they're putting out, that they're willing to do that. Whereas I find it a bit odd when products are sort of kept quite secretive and things are dribbled out, because then it doesn't seem like the publishers have the courage of their convictions to
well, it's because they haven't written it yet, isn't it?
Yeah.
There is.
So no hope of it being play tested, edited, everything.
They're hoping to get paid to write it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I mean, in some ways, Gavin's laughing, isn't he? Because he's got a tried and tested system, and then he's basically taking all of his budget to payroll himself and his team. I can tell he's spent a bunch of money on art. Yeah, and I think he's got a good eye for layout himself. I feel that he does the layout himself. But this team thing, this is what concerns me about. We were talking about Into the Odd. Into the Odd was published by Lost Pages, which is Paolo Greco. And don't forget, Paolo, you owe me some PDFs if you're listening.
Not that he's bitter,
I'll have a chat with
you.
I'll have a chat with you at Dragon Meet and see if I can get that squared away so I don't have to mention it again. I'm taking a leaf out of Dave's book because he was whinging on his podcast about PDFs.
Oh, yeah, Open Combat. Yeah, Open Combat. Yeah. I want my PDFs.
Yeah. Second reminder, third strike and you're out, Open Combat.
Yeah, I haven't seen him yet.
But Paolo, I think he knows his books and his layout, because I got some stuff from him. He's the guy that put together additional materials for Into the Odd, and
isn't that where Maze Rats is?
That's the
first version of Maze Rats in there, isn't it? Additional materials.
That was the one we was talking about. Yeah,
I think I've heard of that.
You think you've heard of Maze Rats? Yeah, like a true Spike Pit fan, huh?
To be honest,
it's no good for the listeners, but Lost Pages is pretty nice with their layout. They did what is it? Wonder and Wickedness and some magic books. I can't remember the names of them now, but they're quite traditional, but they're very tastefully done.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a good idea. He's got a good idea for fonts and things like that. But I don't think he works in isolation.
I was going to say Bastionland isn't done through Lost Pages, though, is it?
No.
Chris
Well,
McDowell's
this is what I'm getting to. So Into the Odd was because I think Chris and Paolo and them, they were like play testing the game and playing on whatever their connection was. But then this is not Lost Pages. This is Chris's own thing. I saw a prototype of it. I can't remember if it was last Dragon Meet or the Dragon. I feel like it was the Dragon Meet before. But I saw it and it was this big thing. And I was worried about those 200 failed careers. Each of them is a double page spread.
Right. Yeah.
In a 300, what is it? A 300-page book?
Yeah, it's 100. Yeah, it makes up 200 pages.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah. So there's 100 of them. They make up 200 pages. That seems like a damn lot. And when you look at the example, you've got like a massive, like the massivest of massive headers. It's like almost as big as the Advanced Fighting Fantasy banner bit on the front cover of that. And it's this big old header. And I think that's a lot of space. And I think it would really work a lot better at digest size. I would be so much happier with it shrunk down a bit.
I agree with you. Looking at it now, it's going to be letter size, and you've got two and a bit tables on each page, haven't you? Which is a choice of 6 things on each table. So there seems to be a lot of wasted space on the page. It's going to be
I do find it odd as well, though, that like Into the Odd is digest size, as is additional materials, and then Electric Bastionland that's based on that, it is a different format.
Yeah,
I would love to know more about that design decision. That is the one thing that is my burning desire is to ask that question. Because I don't see it. I just don't get it.
On the Loco Luthus interview, Chris McDowell said that he just wanted the book for himself, and the Kickstarter is helping to pay for the book he wants for himself. So it makes you wonder, is it just for him?
Yeah, well, he could have just printed that off on his printer, couldn't he?
Yeah.
I've got to admit that obviously I'm taking it in a little bit out of context, so I've not heard the interview, but I do question whether that's the way to sell a book. Go, I'm just making it for myself.
Oh, well, but you can see the spirit of that. You know, I'm not. This. You know, people say that I wrote the game I wanted to play. I've made the book I wanted to buy. Do you know what I mean? I haven't done it for anybody else. I can see the spirit of that. But,
I get that.
But
it's not.
But it is a weird. I think he wants it for a, you know, he's going for a coffee table kind of thing. You know, it's clear to me. He says a lot of the time, everything's in plain speak. This is for bringing in your friends who are a little bit interested in gaming but don't know anything about gaming. And I think maybe if it's a nice coffee table piece, you know, that adds to the event of it. But it does seem to me that, you know, unless those double page spreads are all gorgeous, lush, you know,
they're not.
You know, so then you kind of think, why?
I do think one good change he's made to the Into the Odd rules, though, is changing willpower for charisma. Because I have to agree that charisma is easier to understand for the non-layman than what does.
Well, that was a really interesting part of that interview, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, since you brought us back around to Into the Odd, do we want to pick up with that a little bit more and carry on to talk about the mechanics of that? We've talked about the starter packages and the saves, etc.
Yeah, I think we should.
How about magic Into the Odd?
Yeah, so the thing I really like about Into the Odd is the archive. So it's a rules-light system. I'm always happy with that. It hasn't got much in the way of mechanics, so that kind of gets out of the way for your imagination. And I really like the Arcana, renamed in Electric Bastionland as Oddities. Yep. Because, you know, the point is, and it's flagged up all the way through, these are some suggestions. The point is that the referee makes them up, and it's basically anything that would make your character distinctive. So yes, they are basically spells, but they are any of the things that you would use to differentiate a class or any kind of special ability. can be made into Arcana. They've got various power levels. Some of the builds, as Pete said, start off with them depending on your stats, and then there's a suggestive list, but he even says, your referee will have their own list, and I think you build your whole kind of world and power system through the list of Arcana, which to me is very reminiscent of the Cypher system. So Arcana seemed to me to be a lot like Cyphers in Numenera.
They're items, aren't they?
Yeah. Yes.
Spell is an item, so you could have an orb that has got a sleep spell in it, or whatever you want.
Yeah.
I
really like that.
I was going to say, did I not hear Chris saying that he predated Numenera on that though?
Yeah, well, that was a different. I mean, so maybe he did, but also he was talking about there was the name. That happened because in Numenera there are also things called oddities, which aren't even really ciphers. No. But that's a sort of a diversion, I think, from the from what is really nice here. And I don't, it can be arrived at quite independently, but it's that core idea which Maze Rats picks up on.
Exactly.
Of not sweating class abilities, not having to worry about balance, because you don't have to worry if you break the system, because you've just given out an object. It's a unique object, but being able to build the world and build characters from what you scatter. ICRPG does a similar thing. Being able to build characters from the stuff that you as the GM are happy to feed to them. Now, what I like in ICRPG and the Cypher system is that these are done on random tables. Whereas I think here is the suggestion that, you've just got, as a GM, you've got completely, was it referee in here? As a referee, you've got completely free reign to just feed these things in. But that to me is what's, otherwise, it's a rules light system. There are other ones out there, but I think the Arcana are what make it really distinctive.
And the sort of the random tables at the back is probably what inspired Ben Milton to do his Knave, Maze Rats from, because as we've alluded to earlier, in the additional materials, which was the supplement for Into the Odd, Ben Milton did his first version of Maze Rats.
That's right. Yeah.
And the other thing in additional materials, there's a nice sort of Cyber London hack in there as well, which caught my interest.
There's also a sort of more traditional, fantasy dungeon hack, isn't there?
Yeah, and if you check out Free For All, Keep Off the Borderlands, he's a big Into the Odd fan, and at some point I think we should probably revisit this and try and get him on to talk about it, because I think he's got a game.
Get him to run a game.
Yeah, get him to run a game for us for
the worm.
Yeah,
that would be. Hey, there's an idea.
They are Spencer. If you're listening, there's the challenge. Put a game on for the worms.
Run a game for us. Yeah.
And you've got the any award-winning spin-off of Into the Odd, Death is a New Pink, which is your post-apocalyptic kind of vibe.
Although to be honest, it sounds more like a perfume you'd buy to me with a name like that. But
yeah.
But the other thing, Into the Odd has got it in those tables, and I think in Electric Bastionland he's got what he calls his Spark tables. He's done a thing which I'm increasingly appreciating, which is, he hasn't bothered with reams and reams and reams of flavour or reams and reams and reams of world. He's just given you the random tables.
Yeah, because they've got all the flavour in the world.
Yep.
And that's what I loved about Maze Rats. What you can do with a few entries on a table is amazing. It's a bit like right at the front of the book, like John said, where you roll a couple of dice and come up with your character class. Just them little bits of equipment or those little quirks.
And I think
carry the flavour across.
I think the players, if you've got some good players, they can add to the setting and sort of they'll be more invested in it as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a trend I'm quite happy to see in a lot of different games. I mean, we've seen it when you ran the Black Hack recently, David. I was going to say in the next episode, but the sort of random background tables and stuff like that. I mean, look, say I genned up my character sort of like half an hour before your game, and I didn't sit down going, right, I'm going to gen up this particular type of character. I was like, right, let's just see where it goes. And I had a really fun time during the game, got an entertaining character, and there was quite a few things in the background that like I hadn't thought about myself, but then I was like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, that's interesting. And it was all off these random tables, and it all sort of, when all the characters were together, or the way all the sort of backgrounds meshed, and it sort of like, it told us a bit more about the sort of implied setting was a great thing to see.
Right, and that's why I think particularly about Into the Odd and Bastionland. That idea of just building the setting from a bunch of random tables and your character creation, your randomized character creation. I'm increasingly thinking, why are we wanting more than that? Why are we sweating, big detailed game worlds, big detailed character backgrounds? That's all you need to get.
Because let's face it, you get a rule book with lots of setting in it. How many GMs read the whole thing before putting the game on? You don't. There's just too much to take in, isn't it? You tend to focus on the little bit of area and gen up on that.
Well, I mean, I know Dave, you've been genning a settlement for your Black Hat game. You've been talking about it on your podcast and using the black sand tables to sort of generate like the inhabitants of the various buildings and the businesses and stuff like that. And I certainly know for myself when I'm running my Midlands game, although I've got like the overall map of like Great London, and it goes like, all right, here's a couple of buildings for each district.
Yeah.
A lot of the other stuff I generate using these tables.
Yeah.
Because if someone goes to me like, oh yeah, I want to see if there's like an alleyway knocking about, I've made myself a table where it like strings together stuff like random alleyway names. And I'm like, oh yeah. Quick click of the mouse on this like random table. There we go. There's an alleyway name. Oh, you need to know what that tavern's called. Right, click. Right. There we go. There's the name of the tavern. And it just means I've not got to have like reams and reams and reams of notes detailing every tavern, temple, whatever. But the players can always go somewhere, and I'm not. I've got to think of all these names.
Yep.
It takes the weight off me, and it frees me up to worry about like the actual important stuff.
Yeah, so that, I mean, at point of delivery to the players, I mean, obviously when I'm doing it, I quite enjoy telling people that's what I'm doing because it's part of the fun. But at point of delivery to the players, it's all the same. Oh, actually, I've written every street name on the map, or I've just rolled this street name at this point.
They don't care, do they?
It's exactly the same at point of delivery.
Yeah. But plus, you get some quite entertaining sort of things out of it. I mean, I know when Colin and the rest of the guys who play in my Midlands game were like, oh, we're looking around for a random alleyway, and I like rolled it, and I was like, oh, there's an alleyway nearby, and it's called Murder Way, and they're all like, oh, fucking hell, I'm not going down there. and you get a bit of a laugh out of it, you move on, but it's like, I would have never have chosen if I was like, call an alleyway Murder Way, but it was an entertaining little thing that just happened as a result of folding this random role into what we were doing.
And that might spark an idea for a future episode, wouldn't it? You might think, Murder Way, what happened there? And you can get into your game that you wouldn't have brought before.
I thought it's interesting to hear Chris McDowell talking about his idea on world building, saying that he wanted a mix of the three kind of main techniques that you hear about. So he wanted a little bit of structure that was predetermined and worked out. Then he wanted the randomness of some flavorful tables, and then he still wanted to leave the door open for players to also invent and embellish the setting, sourcing the table, as I like to call it.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought that was interesting to hear him talking about that.
I mean, I think that's something that like a lot of us sort of chase in our own games. You want to have certain sort of pre-scripted or sort of pre-created elements, that you've got there. So you've got like a solid bedrock, but then you also want to have that bit of flexibility to like take into account players' ideas. And for me, I just love it when I roll something random or the player characters do something random that I didn't expect, because
because you're playing the game then.
Yeah, it keeps me on my toes. It keeps the game interesting for me as a GM. Whereas if I've pre-scripted everything down to the last,
it's boring.
Detail, it's like the way analogy I use it's like painting by numbers.
Right, but
that's enjoyable.
But also you can get precious about it. You can get so precious about your pre-planned thing that that you really do. You can't help but want the players to go there, and want to.
Yeah, you can get a bit of anxiety. You can get a little bit worked
Yeah.
up. Oh, it's going wrong. Oh, it's going wrong. This ain't what's supposed to happen. Oh no.
Yeah.
But if you can loosen up a bit, throw some randomness, throw it out to the players, suddenly running the game is not about trying to remember what that great idea was you had, or not trying to capture that idea. It's, man, just let it happen, and roll with it.
It's difficult. I think GMing is always sort of dangerously egotistical anyway. There is that thing. If you want to be the GM, it's dangerously. But I think there is, if you are so concerned about building this world, even if you think you're building this world for your players, you're not really. You're building it for yourself.
Yeah.
And you're letting the players muck about in it. But you're going to get precious about it. So I kind of think it's really the best way to avoid that is to just let go of it yourself and let it.
Do you know what, Dave? I think you should let Spike Pit jump into your world in Black Hack and let him run some craziness in shambles in your town,
you
man.
Totally can. But I'm so happy. I'm so happy that my game is so bloody rock and roll that everybody wants to be the GM now. Yeah, it's brilliant. I'm well up for that.
Get Spike in the shambles. It'd be like.
I mean, I will just say we've only had one session. let me run a couple more sessions.
Yeah.
But you're welcome, mate. Yeah.
I can rock up into the shambles with my urchin game, man. Run that urchin game with Dodger and the lads and old Fagin and all them Dickensian characters in that Black Sand-esque fighting fantasy vibed up. Punk, Diesel, Steam.
Urchin Punk, Dodger Punk.
That can get in the bin.
That's been cut.
Yeah, that's not making it to the final edit. I was going to say though, Colin, without random tables, we wouldn't have ended up with the troll butt diamonds in my game.
Oh no, that was classic, wasn't it? That was, and it went so well, didn't it? And the thing was, it gave us the readies. It gave us the money to, like you talked about in Red Dice Diaries, getting property and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Without them butt diamonds, the ogre butt diamonds, property buying was not on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, to explain to anyone who doesn't know about this, we basically had one of the player characters who was shouting for someone. Always a smart thing to do in a monster infested Underdark situation. So of course a random wandering monster turned up, and it was a big ogre, and I was like, they killed this ogre fairly ingeniously, lure him into a patch of poisonous mushrooms, and the spores got him eventually, and they finished him off. And I was like, right, okay, it's a monster. As we talked about before, about whether you should reveal you're using random tables for people. I was like, right, I was going to level with you guys. It's a wandering monster. Going to roll on this random table, see what we get. And I just happened to roll that he got a large amount of gemstones on him. And I was like, I've described this ogre as he's literally he's wearing nothing. He's got a loincloth. And I was like, where on earth is he keeping this giant diamond, which is the big, thing? And I was like, and that got me thinking. I was like, oh, maybe ogres eat diamonds or gemstones to aid their digestion or something. And obviously, as he's died, some of these gems have dropped out of him, and they were like, oh, right, okay, yeah, cleaned them all off and whatever. And that sort of led on to every time ogres are mentioned now, they're sort of oh, maybe we'll get some of them ogre butt diamonds off them. And that was something that came back entirely because of a random treasure roll.
But I'm quite happy to build random tables into the ritual of the games. Chase talked about rituals. Spike Pete, you've talked about rituals as well, haven't you? But I kind of, I quite like it. If players say, let's look through that door. What's around that corner? I quite like going, well, let's see, shall we? And actually, triggering, indicating that that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm rolling on a random table. I think it's kind of part of the ritual of the game. I don't think it breaks it doesn't for me anyway, I don't think.
I think another benefit of that, Dave, I think you're absolutely right, but another benefit of that is, let's say you've rolled a wandering monster or something, and you go, oh, it's some ridiculously hard troll or something. The players know that's not just you as a GM going oh, I'm going to be a bit of a prick. I'm just giving them this monster because I know it's going to kill them. They know it's the dice that have decided that,
right?
And you're just representing what the dice have rolled. It's
yeah.
Because the dice that they don't have any agenda. They're random as far as they go.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, yeah, you can tweak it a bit depending on what tables you're using, but they know it's not you as the GM having any agenda. It's just the way the dice have fallen, and you're just running through what happens as a result. So, I know that there's not a big OSR thing to worry about balance, but I was thinking, like, if you're like a level 1 party of adventurers, and I'm like, some giant rubbery skinned, like 8-foot troll with huge claws the size of a man's torso comes around the corner, and I was like a first level player, I'd be like, bye, and I'd be gone.
Yeah. But it's important. It's not me that's over leveled that encounter. That's just because I let the dice dictate how the world was. Yeah, I'm with you.
Do you think there's an argument to say that because a lot of us that are doing these podcasts and talking about this stuff, we're running and GMing games, so we're accepting of this like random table thing, whereas maybe people that have not done so much in the way of running, or they're newer to the hobby, or they've read things, because there is criticism of random tables. A few years back, and even when I was a kid, it was like, random tables? Well, you're not a proper DM if you're rolling on random tables. What's going on with that? It's all a bit of a con. It's a con.
But with your random tables, you if you write them well, you can flavour them for what you're doing, can't you? As opposed to having something stupid in the wrong area, but at least you can give a flavour by writing the random tables.
So that's the first thing. Yeah, a good random table is a real work of design artistry.
Yeah.
They're not easy to make. That's the first thing. But what Colin's referring to, that was me sort of throughout the late 90s. I was World of Darkness. I've talked about this before, but I'd be like, random tables. That's no way to build a story. But what you were pointing to, what you were swinging towards instead for building a story, was basically just crap amateur fiction. It was crap versions of Anne Rice. Notes after notes after notes. This vampire prince doesn't like that vampire prince, and this one's got these rules, and this one's got those rules.
It's ironic you mentioned World of Darkness, though, Dave. So if you actually look in the latest edition of Vampire the Masquerade, like V5, there's actually a big random chart to enable you to determine like a random person you were fed on when you got
good on him
as a vampire.
Good on him.
So I think these things tend to sort of go in cycles. I mean, I think what Colin's saying does have an element of truth to it. I mean, if you've never really been exposed to sort of the use of random tables, it might be a bit odd. But for me, as I say, sort of getting started like yourselves with fighting fantasy, let's face it, in the game books, some of the choices you made were pretty arbitrary. Like, do you take this left path? Do you take this right path? Or if you go left, you come across like a small witch in a hovel. If you go right, you're attacked by like orc bandits. So that was pretty random as far as a lot of that went. So by the time I got into like actual role-playing games, I was already used to the idea that like random stuff could happen.
Yeah.
I think they're misunderstood, aren't they? They're misunderstood. It's like after a couple of our first episodes where we talked about random tables on Purple Worm, we did have a call in from a gentleman, I can't remember his name, and he sort of said, but they kind of affect your storytelling. They mess up your storytelling. You if you're using random tables, you don't get that story. And I would respectfully disagree with that, where you could have that, but it's about how you're using those random tables. Because because you use some random tables, it doesn't mean you're using them exclusively, because you've got random table selection, because there's so many of them. There's an art to choosing the right ones.
Yeah.
There's an art to knowing when to use them and when to kind of keep your storyline going. So it's not just like you rock up. You rarely just rock up and just chuck dice on arbitrary tables.
I bet you £1 as well. There's players out there that don't realise that GMs use random tables on them.
Right, all the time. If not on the spot, in their planning.
I'm not aware of it, so...
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the random tables affecting storytelling as well, I've always been a great proponent of the fact that the story is simply what happens when the players are engaged with the game. It's not something I prepare in advance before and they sort of make their way through. And
because then you're in railroad territory,
exactly.
aren't you?
And of course, I will go like, oh, okay, I've got some NPCs in on my Midlands game, and I know what their plans are and what they're working towards. But that's not set in stone. So if the players like interfere with their plans or they help them with their plans or whatever, things change.
Well, they're your fronts.
If I want a story, I'll read a fiction book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In the Black Hat game we played recently, the story was Drend carrying Wit, down the tower in a hurry, not getting eaten by the skeletons. It's just it's whatever the players do within those contours that you've established.
I also love the fact that session pretty much started with like Colin's character being like, "Oh yeah, let's have a party."
I know, straight away. Yeah.
Disco ball.
So is this the segue to the next episode then?
Yeah, well, I think so, because we were talking about tables because of the reliance of Into the Odd and the Maze Rats and all of these systems that we're talking about. There is some shared DNA there. What we might want to look at in the next episode is where is this shared DNA? What is the origin of this shared DNA? Perhaps we can get to the bottom of that. We're going to talk about a black hack. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, so before we wrap up, does anyone have any sort of closing thoughts on Into the Odd or anything they want to bring up?
I suppose we should just mention that anybody's interested in Electric Bastionland, check out the Kickstarter. It's live now, and it's £40 for the hardback book or £15 for the PDF. So check that out on Kickstarter if you're interested.
Yeah,
and don't listen to me because I'm as picky as, and these three will tell you. They call me picky. I call it discerning.
I call it big pick.
I've got one more little sell for it. A thing that appeals to me, aside from the fact that I do think oddities are basically ciphers, so that appeals to me as a big Numenera fan. But what I really like, yes, it's already been mentioned. We've got all these failed careers, which is Warhammer, and the influence is quite happily and proudly there. But there's also a poignancy to it. They are failed careers, which actually sets up your character, and your character starts off in debt as well. It sets up your character with a certain kind of poignancy, which I'm really looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Yeah, I like the look of it.
Yeah, and I think even if you're not sure you're interested in it, it is certainly worth having a look on the Kickstarter page and checking out that sort of advanced preview PDF, because basically it's free. You've got nothing to lose. Why not have a look, and then you can make a more informed decision about whether you want to get involved with the Kickstarter or not.
And if you're tight for cash, back the PDF and then print it out at A5 as a booklet.
Yeah,
you can have it whatever size you want. Yeah,
that's it. Do what you like.
I recommend digest size. Okay, so that's it from Dave, Pete, Colin, and myself for another episode. Join us next time where we'll be talking about possibly the sort of this historic DNA of random tables that a lot of these games we like share, and more specifically we'll be talking about the Black Hag. So take care, enjoy whatever you're playing, and watch out for those purple worms. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.